Mike Wolfe's sentencing stunned viewers across America when the American picker star was led away in handcuffs. Everyone thought his arrest was related to some dispute over antiques or perhaps a business disagreement with the History Channel. According to breaking news reports, Wolfe was arrested because the death of his former co-host Frank Frits wasn't from natural causes as initially reported. Instead, investigators now classify it as premeditated murder. Medical reports indicate Frits was found with lethal levels of medication in his system. He was deliberately overdosed, and prosecutors grabbed Wolfe for the murder because it was calculated, not accidental. Drugging your former business partner who trusted you completely is beyond comprehension. Some would even call it evil. Although many fans believed the tension between the two pickers was just for television ratings, Wolfe was already behind bars and facing serious charges for what prosecutors called a revenge killing motivated by jealousy and greed. However, reports surfaced on social media showing that Wolfe initially had his charges temporarily downgraded as investigators gathered more evidence. Another post revealed that Wolfe was initially arrested after a crew member from American Pickers placed him at Fritz's home when he died. The Iowa State Police investigated thoroughly and found damning evidence including Wolfe's fingerprints on medication bottles and suspicious text messages to Fritz, leading them to push for first-degree murder charges. The investigation into Frank Fritz's death began when the medical examiner noticed inconsistencies in his toxicology report. The official cause of death had been announced as complications from his stroke, but the autopsy revealed dangerous levels of prescription medications in his system, levels far beyond what would be prescribed for his condition. This immediately raised red flags, especially since Fritz had been carefully following his medication regimen during recovery. The Iowa State Police quietly opened an investigation focusing on who had access to Fritz in his final hours. What they discovered shocked even veteran detectives. Security footage from Fritz's neighborhood showed Wolfe's vehicle arriving at the residence late at night, approximately 3 hours before emergency services were called. Later that night, it was Wolfe who called 911 claiming he had stopped by to check on his old friend and found him unresponsive. Upon arrival, paramedics found Fritz unresponsive with no pulse. Attempts to resuscitate him failed, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial reports suggested it was related to his previous stroke, but the toxicology results told a different story. What made investigators particularly suspicious was Wolfe's behavior immediately following Fritz's death. Instead of the period of mourning one might expect, he moved quickly to assert control over Fritz's collection and intellectual property. Within 48 hours, he had contacted Fritz's attorneys about acquiring rights to his name and image for future American Picker merchandise. According to testimony from production staff, he also immediately moved to access Fritz's storage locations containing valuable antiques that had never been featured on the show. Several crew members reported that Wolfe seemed unusually focused and not particularly grief-stricken when discussing business matters so soon after Fritz's passing. When detectives searched Wolfe's residence and office, they discovered a hidden safe containing several unlabeled prescription bottles later identified as containing the same medications found in Fritz's system. Most damning of all was a journal found in Wolfe's travel bag where he had written extensively about his growing resentment toward Fritz. Some entries dated back years with increasingly hostile language. In one entry from just weeks before Fritz's death, he wrote, "F thinks he can come back and take half the spotlight again. He forgets that without me there would be no show. He's become a liability. The network is showing me there's only one way to save what I've built." During the 6-week trial, Wolfe appeared surprisingly calm, sitting quietly next to his attorneys as the prosecution laid out how he had methodically planned Fritz's death. The jury heard evidence that he had been researching untraceable poisons and ways to make a murder look like natural causes. His internet search history revealed queries such as, "Can stroke medication interactions be detected after death?" and "How to make someone's death look like stroke complications." The prosecution argued that Wolfe had taken advantage of Fritz's previous health issues, seeing them as the perfect cover for murder. Former American Pickers crew members testified about witnessing disturbing changes in the dynamics between Wolfe and Fritz in the years leading up to Fritz's departure from the show and subsequent death. One production assistant testified that she had overheard heated arguments about the future direction of the program, with Wolfe demanding complete creative control. He told Frank that he had lost the right to equal billing after his health problems, the assistant testified. Several witnesses described Wolfe as becoming increasingly controlling, often speaking disparagingly about Fritz to network executives and isolating him from longtime friends in the antique community. Perhaps the most emotional testimony came from Danielle Colby, who reluctantly took the stand for the prosecution. Fighting back tears, she described confronting Wolfe about his behavior toward Frits. "I noticed Mike had become obsessed with being the sole face of American Pickers," she testified. "When I asked him about reconciling with Frank, he became defensive and angry, telling me to stop interfering in things that don't concern you." Colby described finding disturbing notes in Wolfe's office about Fritz's medication schedule and questioning Wolfe, who claimed he was just concerned about Frank's health. The defense team tried to paint a picture of a misunderstood friendship, suggesting that Wolfe had genuinely tried to reconcile with Frits before his death. They brought in network executives who testified about Wolfe's public statements supporting Fritz's recovery. However, this theory was severely undermined by testimony from Fritz's personal physician, who stated that while Frits had been concerned about his health, he had been optimistic about his recovery and had been making plans to launch his own antique business. The doctor also confirmed that he had never prescribed the medications found in Fritz's system at such high doses. During cross-examination, Wolfe's carefully maintained composure began to crack. When asked directly if he had given Frits the medications, he snapped at the prosecutor, "You have no idea what it's like to build something from nothing and watch someone else take credit, to smile for the cameras while everyone thinks he's just as important to the show's success." His outburst caused his defense team to call for a recess, but the damage was done. Jurors later reported that this moment was pivotal in their deliberations, as it revealed the resentment Wolfe still harbored years after Fritz's departure from the show. The financial motive became clear when forensic accountants testified about suspicious changes to Wolfe's business structure. In the months before Fritz's death, Wolfe had been quietly restructuring his companies to absorb Fritz's intellectual property in case of his incapacitation or death. He had also taken out a business insurance policy on Fritz, making his company the beneficiary of a $5 million payout. Additionally, prosecutors revealed that Wolfe had established several shell companies that Fritz had been unaware of and had been transferring valuable antiques into these entities, totaling over $2 million in assets. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict. When the judge announced his life sentence without possibility of parole, that's when everything went completely off the rails. Wolfe, who had maintained a poised demeanor throughout the entire trial, suddenly jumped up screaming, "You don't understand. He was going to ruin everything. He was going to destroy my legacy." He lunged across the defense table, sending legal pads and water glasses flying. The bailiffs rushed toward him, but he was already charging toward Fritz's family, swinging wildly before they could restrain him. People in the courtroom began screaming and pushing toward the exits as Wolfe broke free again, this time grabbing an antique walking stick that had been entered as evidence and swinging it like a weapon, striking one of the bailiffs in the shoulder. "I built American Pickers. It was my life's work," he shrieked as 3 more officers tackled him to the ground. The judge was evacuated from the courtroom. As officers tried to subdue Mike Wolfe during sentencing, he violently fought back, screaming about betrayal and trying to lunge at Fritz's sister, who had to be escorted out. "I deserved everything. It was my show," he yelled as they handcuffed him. The courtroom fell silent when he locked eyes with Danielle Colby and shouted, "Tell them the truth. Tell them what Frank was really like." Colby turned away in distress, while others broke down. The trial exposed how Wolfe had spent years dividing the American Pickers crew, turning them against Fritz. His courtroom meltdown escalated, injuring several people, including his attorney, and sealing his fate. Experts said the outburst destroyed any chance of appeal. In the days that followed, former colleagues painted a darker picture of Wolfe, describing him as paranoid, angry, and manipulative off-camera. One producer recalled Wolfe's rages when things didn't go his way. The History Channel has since pulled his episodes, sponsors have withdrawn, and the show's future is uncertain. Fritz's family is fighting for control of his collection while preparing legal action against the network. Psychologists believe Wolfe may suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, explaining the gap between his public charm and private resentment. Perhaps most disturbing was how he used Fritz's death for personal gain, raising over $1 million in merchandise sales while publicly grieving. Prosecutors called it a calculated deception of fans mourning alongside a man responsible for Fritz's death. Wolfe's life sentence leaves fans grappling with betrayal. Longtime viewers and colleagues alike are shocked by the revelations. Danielle Colby has taken a break from TV, calling for healing and privacy. The judge's closing words now feel hauntingly accurate. "You used your platform to preach the value of the past while plotting the death of the man who helped build that platform." As Wolfe was dragged away, his final words, "Goodbye forever," "The truth will come out someday," echoed through a courtroom that had just witnessed the downfall of a television icon. The legacy of American Pickers is forever stained by murder, deception, and the collapse of the man once at its center.